call the village board meeting of Monday, June 20th, to order. And want to remind everyone that we are being recorded through Zoom, and to make sure that when you speak into your mic and directly into your mic. If you turn your head, you may not pick it up, especially depending on how loud your voice is. And some of us may be, not me, but some of us may be soft spoken. So just a reminder. So we will go through roll call. Johnson. Trustee Quirk.
Here.
Trustee Thompson.
Present.
Trustee Owens.
Here.
Trustee Secrets.
Here.
Trustee Booker.
Here.
President Montgomery present. We invite the audience to join us for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And we do have a pad here for persons desiring to be heard. I don't know if there's anyone on it or if anyone emailed or called in. Okay. What I would like to just say, just as an acknowledgement, we want to wish all of the fathers on the board or in the audience a belated Happy Father's Day. We know that you don't get as much recognition as the moms do. So we just want to make sure that you know, Happy Father's Day.
We don't get it.
So, in your packet, we do have our reports, elected officials and staff reports. Are there any questions from the reports that are in the packet? If not, I would like to just add one thing that I forgot to include. Yesterday was Juneteenth Day, the official day, and I did participate in a parade and activities in the city of Milwaukee with other county officials and state officials and federal. So it was a hot day, it was good, but a long day. So just wanted to share that because it was not in my report. The next item on our agenda is consent agenda. And under the consent agenda, we have consideration of minutes from the June 6, 2022 meeting. We have consideration of the 2022-23 liquor license renewals, consideration extending service agreement for Clifton, Larson, Allen, and Tom Watson to assist with finance operations, and consider confirming appointment of Derek Tanner to treasurer. Are there any questions on any of the items listed in the consent agenda? Trustee Quirk and then Trustee Booker.
Under B, new business, I have a question about how we included business under B. I thought we didn't table it, but rather we set it aside for reconsideration at the next meeting. I thought the motion was not to table.
We're under the consent agenda.
This is minutes.
Oh, that's what you're talking about, under the minutes, okay. What item?
B, new business.
Yes.
Ordinance. I didn't think the motion was to table. I thought it was to set
Defer. Okay, I can make
Right,
that.
it was deferred.
Because tonight we would either have to take it off the table or we, we'd have to go through all that, so. Correct?
Thank you. Trustee Booker.
Yeah, I just wanted to, on item C under the consent agenda, we're extending that agreement because of we're waiting for the new treasurer to start. Is that what the idea is?
Well, we're not fully caught up yet, so, you approved as a board a maximum of $15,000 for CLA, and I'm just letting you know, as I manage how much we're expending there, that we are exceeding that limit. And as much as I would want to, stop, if we stopped where we were, we wouldn't comply with the timeline we gave Moody's, which would have a negative impact on our bond rating. So I wouldn't advise that. And I would love an overlap with Tom Watson as we start with the budget. I think it would be helpful for the new finance director to be able to work with Tom Watson since he has been so good. So that's why I'm proposing an overlap there to help Derek get started and have that transition.
Then under item D, do you have a start date for the person or?
Yes.
Okay.
If this is confirmed, I have a signed employment offer of employment, maybe July 6th.
And I believe that's in your report, wasn't it? Or did I see it?
It might have been, it was a while since I wrote that, yeah, but yeah, it might be.
Let's see. Okay.
Trustee Owens?
Yeah, I didn't see that either. Could you just give us a little details on Derek Tanner and how the whole process worked? I know in the last meeting, we did approve that, the guidelines and things like that, but can you give us a few more details on that?
Sure. Yeah, we went through an application process and had an interview with candidates. Myself and Matthew was kind of representing department heads. Yvette, since she's the other person in the finance department, was part of the interview panel. Trustee Booker is the chair of the Finance and Public Works Committee, served on the interview panel, and then Gosha is our HR manager. So we had 5 people in the interview panel. And we also did tours for the candidates where we took them along. That was a good opportunity for me to kind of sit in the back seat and see how they would interact in a more informal environment. And it just allowed them a chance to get to know the village a little bit more. Derek came on top. He has previous experience with the village of Brown Deer. So his orientation and transition, I think it's gonna be a lot quicker than some of the other candidates who applied. And all of his references gave glowing remarks on his technical abilities. So he has past experience working with who our auditor is. So for all those reasons, we made the recommendation to proceed with his appointment. So they also had to provide a writing sample. So I asked them to review our adopted budget as well as the recent comprehensive annual financial report and give an assessment on where the village is at. And Derek gave a very honest assessment and wasn't afraid to give some constructive feedback. And so I think with his technical abilities, he'll be able to help us continue getting caught up on some things that we need to get at.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? If not, do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move approval of the consent agenda.
With revisions.
Yes.
It's been moved by trustee Booker to approve consent agenda with revisions and seconded by trustee Thompson. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Ayes have it, motion carries. The next item on our agenda is consider approval of an alcohol beverage retail Class A license application for the sale of fermented malt beverages at Brown Deer Mobile located at 5125 West Brown Deer Road. That application is in your packet. Any questions or comments? Trustee Quirk?
So if we approve the Brown Deer Mobile, then the other 2 gas station locations are gonna want to have the same privilege. Also, in the past, we denied Walmart a liquor license, or sorry, Walgreens a liquor license. And so I'm sure they will follow shortly. So the consequence of this vote is at least 4 additional locations that are going to want to serve malt beverages or wine and beer. So even though only 1 is mentioned in our agenda, the others will follow shortly. You just know it.
I think, as I look at this application and look at the village of Brown Deer being 4.5 square miles, we have a number of outlets on Main Street as well as some of the other establishments. I do not see a need, and I certainly agree with Trustee Corp that this would open the door for additional outlets, which I don't believe we need. We're not going to expand our square footage. And and I'm not sure, did we check with the police department as it relates to any concerns they might have?
Yeah, I mean, we talked with them, but, I think some of their comments were similar to what we included in the memo based on the health department, some of the research and recommendations by, the national agency there. So, they echoed the sentiment that the health department has.
Other comments, Trustee Booker?
Yes, so I ran an economic development company for 10 years in the central city of Milwaukee. And Trustee Johnson could attest to this. They had more liquor stores per square foot than I've ever seen. I mean, they were everywhere. And the problems, we actually had a gas station who would stay out late, silver late, and sold liquor. So it created a bunch of problems, especially after hours. And I personally would not want to see something like that occur around here. Business on selling liquor shuts down at 9 o'clock around here. And I think that's what it should stay at. That's just my opinion of it. I don't support it. I didn't support it for the city of Milwaukee, but they were already there.
Other questions or comments? Trustee Corp?
So this issue did come up in the past with a different board, and they decided to not allow it in the same way that they decided to not allow Walgreens to sell liquor. And my concern is all these establishments are not building an addition to house the liquor. So what is it going to take the place of? Soft drinks, snack items, toiletries, things like that. And I've been in stores where they've been of the same kind where they're allowed to sell liquor, and it just takes over. I guess it's a high profit margin, maybe it drives traffic or whatever. And I think it would change the flavor of all these stores. To tie it in with getting gas and drinking and driving, it's a concern for me.
And I think the other thing, I have had an opportunity to talk to several other leaders of other municipalities in the North Shore. It's my understanding no one else has gas stations with an outlet for beer. So,
Well, Quick Mart does.
what that's meant for.
Yeah, a lot of them. A
Well,
lot of them do.
Quick Mart,
Mhm.
right.
And
Well,
other gas stations.
the municipalities I checked in the North Shore did not. So, but other questions or comments? We have a vote. Is there a motion? Trustee Thompson?
I move to deny the Class A fermented malt beverage license application for the Brown Deer Mobile at 5125 West Brownview Road for the 2022-23 period.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved by Trustee Thompson and seconded by Trustee Johnson to deny approval of alcohol beverage retail Class A license application for the Brown Deer Mobile at 5125 West Brown Deer Road. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Ayes have it, motion carries, that application has been denied. Item B, discuss village volunteer committees. And I guess Karen probably printed out these large spreadsheets,
Yeah.
and I brought my magnifying glass because it is, well, the bigger you get, the smaller the print. And I got good glasses, but you have to look real close. So, this is something that, and I don't know, Tyler, do you want to kind of share?
Yeah, one of the things I've really been happy with is getting to know each of the volunteer committees, and they for an immense amount of time. I mean, every time we have a board meeting, some of the members are attending our meetings, which I highly appreciate. It's a lot of these groups are well-informed groups who are wanting to help out around here. So for some time, I wanted to just do a brief, comprehensive discussion, especially when a month or two ago, we talked about diversity, equity, inclusion. We had someone from the community speak, and as a reminder, as we as a board a year ago took action on wanting to do some kind of activities, initiatives related to DEI. So I want to get that going. But in order to do that, I just need a little bit more feedback and guidance for you as a board on how to proceed with committees. Based on, review of where our staff is at, I want to be cautious of adding more committees because I think we've reached a max point as far as what they're capable of taking on just with their current workloads. So the one thing I ask is if we're going to create any more committees that, we review some of these others and maybe do some kind of trade-off or consolidation. So we kind of remain at 19. And as we're kind of doing a comprehensive review of our committees, there are some other things I just wanted to take a note of. One was we have some committees that have one-year terms. For me, I've been a volunteer before when I was first starting off. And it takes like 1 year to learn everything. So, I think for me, maybe a recommendation to increase that, anything with a 1 year term to a 2 or 3 year term, would be a recommendation I would have. And then, just, some sustainability initiatives we've been talking about, sustainability action plan. As the manager, like if that gets approved in the 2023 budget, I'm trying to think of how we would proceed with overseeing those activities. And there's a few ways that we could do that. So I have some thoughts there in that paragraph in the memo. But I just wanted to take a look at our committees. So basically, I just have some discussion points that I thought if each of you could kind of go around and just express some of your thoughts would be helpful. Big thank you to Karen, because Karen put together that spreadsheet and that took some time. So, one of the things I thought would be really helpful for you as a board, committee, staff is to have a one place where you could go and get all the information on our committee. So I think this will be a spreadsheet we'll continue to update, but I think that will be a nice resource for all of us. And then I also just included, some research I did on our North Shore communities as far as how they go about their volunteer committees to just provide you a little bit more information. So with that being said, no action tonight, just some general discussion that if you want to do DEI, what does that look like? Is that just a one-time task force? Is it a committee? Is it something you just want me as a manager to do? Which I'll do no matter what. But I want a little bit more context as far as how you'd like me to proceed with that initiative. And then just some discussion about, if you want to modify the 1 year terms, which we could bring back in ordinance if you want to do that, and anything else that's on your mind.
So Tyler, I do have a question, and it's under the building board. Under other notes on the end, it says the members of the building board, with the exception of the citizen member and the village board member, shall be compensated as established by the village. It was a meeting, I don't know, maybe a month or a couple months ago that we changed. Not to require those trustee because we hadn't had a trustee on it in years. I think when Carl stepped down and was president of the board. So that was a meeting, I don't know, a couple months ago. And so we added another professional person, and then we just had one citizen. So
Okay,
you might want to go back and,
we can modify that.
yeah, and look at that. Trustee Corp.
So I have a couple clarifications on beautification. Beautification meets the second Tuesday after the first Monday of every month at 6:30. Second Tuesday after the first Monday. So in other words, if the month starts on a Tuesday, it actually ends up being the third Tuesday. Confusing. Second Tuesday after the first Monday. Also, on the second sheet, the spreadsheet where we have what every other community has, other communities, including Bayside, Glendale, Shorewood, and Whitefish Bay, have a tree board.
River Hills does too.
Oh, we're gonna.
Yeah, so their tree board can serve either on one of the public committees or they have a specific tree. board. But I did look up River Hills as a tree. If they're a tree city, they have to have that. Or tree board, but it can be mixed with some other.
Right, and I think a lot of them, that's what they do, is they mix it with another committee. But when they fill out that application for Tree City USA, they identify that they have some type of tree board.
Also, Fox Point also has the tree commission and the weed commissioner.
Oh, yeah, Fox Point Tree City. I think all the North Shore, right?
They all have tree boards.
They must. I pulled it up.
So we call it by a different name, but it serves the same function as the organization, as the committee in these other communities.
Other questions? I do know, one of the things that, and I don't think it's in here, but as we look at some of these committees, and they're scheduled to meet every month, but they haven't, or the meetings are canceled consistently. As we think about consolidating or changing, I think that needs to be brought into consideration. If you look at the last, say, 2 years, a particular committee, how many times have they met? And maybe it's not that they're not meeting, maybe because the charge that has been determined is not something that they're doing. And you appoint somebody to a committee, whether it's a year or 2 years, and then they never meet. That's not like an appointment at all. And then you have others that are meeting constantly. So just thinking about that. And then as I looked at, let me make sure I'm talking in the mic, traffic and public safety, it says they are responsible for ensuring the enforcement of traffic, human rights, protection of property, and other miscellaneous regulatory ordinances. When we say protection of property, what does that mean? I don't know.
I don't know.
Would that be like maybe code enforcement type?
Well,
thing?
and that's what I wrote on my sheet, is this.
Would that be a good place? Yeah, I don't know. Historically, we haven't, since I've been here, anyways, taking the code enforcement stuff there, but maybe that's a place where it's supposed to go. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I wrote on my sheet, but I wasn't sure. Trustee Thompson.
My question is, is there an opportunity, or are we thinking of an opportunity to kind of combine some of these committees, which would then impact the number of persons on the committee, but it would give us an opportunity to have more in the same token with traffic and public safety, by taking that committee and putting it with another committee with like responsibilities, it would give them an opportunity to kind of bridge subject matter experts in certain conversations. I.e. like for community development. There was a huge discussion at the last meeting regarding traffic patterns and things like that. But by the time it came to the committee, it had already gone through community development and it was pretty much locked and loaded. So is there an opportunity to take some of those committees that kind of intersect at some point and make them one committee with subcommittees under that primary committee.
That's a question. Trustee Secrets and then trustee Booker.
Well, and I think Adam was that too. I was thinking if you thought of what committees might be, we could put together to make, I mean, Karen, I know you've been spending a lot of time looking through these, and I don't know if there's thoughts that, if there's ones that we can combine, because I do know that in the past, DEI has been a large, listening to the community, they would like that committee, and so how can we facilitate that? Because I do think there is a need, but maybe you might have an idea of which ones might be good together.
I can take that question. If you want a DEI committee, what I would suggest is, yeah, asking yourself what committees are not meeting right now and the reasons for that. My assessment, if it's correct, there's 2 committees that probably haven't, I know traffic and public safety, actually, I think they just did meet. Is that correct, Matthew?
We did, but I think it was more so because we had new members and we forced an agenda item.
Oh, you did, okay,
It was an update on construction projects.
okay.
So, just one other comment on traffic and public safety, like one of the things that committee will approve, but these things happen so few and far between now that the village is completely built out. Like if there's gonna be a new stop sign put in somewhere, that has to be codified in the ordinance, so we'll have to pass that through the committee, and then that comes forward to the board, like a yield sign or new no parking signs. When I was here, there was a couple spots that we did end up adding, and we met more regularly, but then there's long stretches of time when there's nothing that comes up where there's a concern with the stop sign. So that's one thing we can do.
So that, I know that's one committee that, prior to me starting that hadn't been meeting routinely. I think tourism is the other one, which once we have the marketing communications coordinator in place, like, I think that will be a committee that will need a lot more. So I think there is a plan in place that will change that. And we have to have a tourism commission anyways with hotel tax. So, but, so just based on current meetings, there's the potential that if you wanted to create an opening for DEI, traffic and safety could go with finance and public works as an example, but just know that if you do that, you have a group now that's no longer, just their sole concentration is on traffic and instead it's being, consolidated into a group where it's 7 members, right? So now their agendas get a little bit longer. So, I think there's a trade-off there, but if you want DEI as a committee, all the other committees are meeting right now. So I think that's where I get nervous making a recommendation, because a lot of these groups are in a good routine, and I don't want to take away their good momentum. And there's a reason why a lot of these groups apply for the committees, because they're passionate about those areas. So, honestly, that's the only committee that I know that hasn't been routinely meeting. So that's where we as a board may want to, think about whether that trade-off is something you would want to consider.
One committee that's not on here, you had your hand up.
Yeah,
Okay, go ahead. Trustee Booker, and then I have a comment, and then trustee Court.
So I looked over this whole matrix here, and one of the things that kind of stuck out to me is the term lengths. You got from 1 year to 4 years. I mean, I don't know what the rhyme or reason is on this, but I think we need to look at that. Why is the term length like 1 year for personnel? Implication, why isn't it 3? Or, why is it we only have 3 members on personnel? Some we have 5, some, 9 members. I don't know if we need consistency, but I'm trying to understand. I know personnel needs more than 3 people.
Yeah.
Okay, and so, but what should be the norm for committees of this, for villages of this size and population? I think that needs to be looked at. I'm not asking for an answer for that, unless she doesn't want to give it. But
Well, I can tell you from my past experience working with a lot of committees, 7 is a nice number. Now, if you have something that's a little bit more very specific, I think 5 is a fine number. Some you have to have just by, whether it's a state statute, like that's already determined for you, you can't change that. But, you know, 7 tends to be a really nice number. Now, if you have a group like the special events committee or something like that, where it's a very involved group, having even more people is really helpful for those types of committees. But I've always found 7 to be a nice magic number, but it depends really on the committee.
Yeah, and also,
Talking your mic, please.
I also concur that we need to look at combining some of these committees. We have finance and personnel, but majority of our agenda items really are public works. And then we have the committees kind of staffed with people with finance or fiscal background, and very few people with an engineering, public works kind of background. That's the majority of what we deal with. So I think we could look at combining that with something else that would make sense. And then look at the makeup of the committees, and then look at the people that are staffing these committees, try to bring people with that expertise that would be helpful. I mean, I'm an accountant, okay? I'm not an engineer. I can look at it. And you can, in math, you can tell me what it is, and I have to go along with it because I don't know, you know. But, and then the other side of that is finance committees, you know, we look at, I know the financial reports will probably change. But in the past, we would get information that had no real rhyme or reason. And then we couldn't vote on it anyway, because it has to go to the full board for, you know, to be approved. And so, to me, that's just a waste of people's time to look at information. You can't do anything about it, even if you have questions, because it comes to the full board. So I think we need to, I think it's an opportunity to look at the makeup of some of these committees, what their intent is, and then look at the people that want to participate on these committees and bring the right people, put the right people, heads in the right hole, you know what I mean, so to speak.
So I had 2 comments. One is farmer's market is not on.
Correct.
So that's one that's missing. And I'm not sure. I think is it 5 members? I think it is 5.
It is 5, yeah, it's 5.
And then in terms of the terms, one of the challenges that you have when you have 1-year appointments, I think the intent in the beginning, when the committees, typically when they're established, you want to have, always have some consistency. So if there's, say 2 years or 3 years, you bring people on at different times. So if people roll on, you always have somebody consistent. But with 1 year, you got everybody rolling over together. And so I think, you know, there needs to be some consideration there. And a lot of people have been renewed over and over and over on 1 year to 15 and 20 years. So it's no longer terms, it's almost like permanent. And I've had this conversation before, but anyway, I would love to see more than a year term, because like you said, if you're gonna serve, it depends on how often you meet. That first year, you might not have a lot of meetings to really gain some experience. And then you may roll on if you decide you don't want to stay, or 2 years gives you at least enough to be able to talk about some of the issues that may come up. So just some thoughts. Trustee Court.
So, several things. Piggybacking off of your 1-year term, the trustee on the special events committee has a 1-year term. And so that person comes in June, their first meeting is June, and then there's the 4th of July. So they don't really have any time to do any work or participate very much coming in June for that first 4th of July. And then they serve the rest of the year and they're removed before the 4th of July. So
What person is that?
the trustee on the special events committee. The trustee on the special events
Oh, the
committee,
trustee.
according to our ordinances, only serves 1 year. So that's a little ridiculous. That term definitely needs to be lengthened, because you don't really get your feet on the year, as you said, until maybe the 2nd year, especially in the special events committee, which is involved. There's a lot to know. There's a lot to, historically to know. Second, regarding traffic and public safety, so everyone here a lot of people here are new. So short-term memory would say the traffic and public safety hasn't been meeting. Historically, they've continuously met. The problem that we've had lately is that the chief of police usually heads up this committee, and we haven't had a chief. So we've had a void in the police department with various other staff members, picking up the slack, which has been, difficult and sketchy. So to say that traffic and public safety haven't been meeting is only true if you've only been here a short period of time. And the other point, regarding Renee's point about finance and public works, finance and public works are combined because we spend a large amount of money on public works initiatives, right? It's like the second most expensive thing we spend money on, next to police and fire. And they have their own commissions and entities to govern them, North Shore Fire Department, Police Commission. So public works initiatives are directly linked and hold meetings with finance because that's a huge chunk of our money. So all of the first projects that, when they come up are presented to finance first because it involves a lot of money, a lot of our tax money. So that's why those two things are linked. So it makes sense why you should have someone on the committee with some kind of DPW interest, experience, or engineering or something like that. Yeah, those are the three things I wanted to remark.
Trustee Owens.
I just wanted to ask a question, in regards to this case. We got like 19 committees here. And these committees were all established at some point in time. Do we have any history on when they were established and the reason why they were established? And then pulling that forward, seeing if they're actually still needed now?
Track record would be, in our code, you can see when the ordinances were established. So, I mean, that record is there. We maintain records of all minutes and that, so, we have that history. And as I mentioned, majority of these committees have at least been meeting once every year. Now, and some we need to have, close to half of them we need to have for a variety of different reasons. So we have that history, and the history states majority of them have a meeting routinely. So, but yeah, we can go back in the code and identify too when those were originally established and amended.
Okay, and then see too if they're still, if the purpose is still the same today as it was, when they were established.
Yes.
Trustee Johnson.
I think this is a very good debate, but I guess I'm a little bit confused on how we're gonna move forward because everybody has a different opinion. And when it comes to making a final decision, I know it's made it before, but what recommendation is coming from who for us to make that decision?
Well, I think tonight is a discussion. As we, first of all, most of the information is documented. When we talk about how often committees have met, it's documented. It's in the, on our website, and it tells you when meetings have been canceled. I've been on the board 4 years, and I've had to appoint people to committees, and there are some committees that have not met often at all. So I would certainly, as we look at, and this is a recommendation, hopefully to go back to staff to say, we have staff that are assigned to each one of these committees to really have them look back at the work, whether or not they've been meeting, if the purpose is still what is needed today, or if we need to be tweaking it. And as some of the committees specifically say, like the building board, you want certain people with expertise. Should we be looking at traffic and public, and not traffic and public safety, but finance and public works? Someone that does have an engineering background, or someone that does have contractor background. And I look for some of that, but if it was in here, because then some people just submit their application, and if there's nothing there that really details what we're looking for, then they feel like then I just want to come on and learn. But we may need people with more expertise. So I think tonight, we're sharing our feedback with staff, and maybe at the end, we can make a recommendation that we want them to go back, maybe have whoever's assigned to these committees to look at, and I don't know if you've done that, to see if they think the charge, the purpose of the committee should be changed. And if we need to be looking at, get my magnifying glass here. Position, you know, the staff person, but they make people that are here every, 2 or 3 times a week for different committee meetings. Is that, and even the timing of the meetings, should that even be considered? But certainly the term, I think having people look at different terms for these committees. And as it relates to 1-year appointments for trustees, that changes, every year. It could be somebody resigning, or it could be somebody who is up for election and don't win. So sometimes you're forced, and when new people come on, at least under my leadership, what I've been doing is looking at the expertise that people bring to see what committees they would best serve on, and not just relegate them to anything. But if they come with a specific skill set, how do we then connect them with a committee that skill set could help be that liaison from the board to that committee? So, but that's, further discussion. Anyone else? Trustee Booker and then Trustee Owens. Oh, I'm sorry, Trustee Booker.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we have to get staff input on this because they staff the different committees. So this is really, I think, an opportunity to express what I've been looking at it for 2+ years serving. Not that I have all the answers because I don't. But the idea is to look to see if some of these committees could be combined. And I think all the committees have issues that needs to be addressed and voted on. The question is, do they need separate committees to do that? Or could we combine them into some of these other committees? It'll save staff time. It'll save members time, the time they spend coming to these different meetings. And I think it'll be more efficient. Now, how we get there to get to Trustee Johnson's comment, I'm not sure. I don't know if that means a work group or if that means staff comes back with a proposal and we review it. I'm not sure. I think especially those that serve these committees would want to have some input into these discussions, since we serve on these committees. But I think the discussion needs to be had, especially as I talked about before, term lengths, number of members, minimum number of members on committees. And so I think that's where we are right now.
Okay. Trustee Johnson.
Trustee Booker hit right there on the head, but I was kind of looking for advice with recommendation, because there's trustees that have the history of these different committees along with staff. I think if we could put together that work group, I think we can probably move this along a lot quicker and get this done, because I think this is one of these things that we can easily tackle, because there's other bigger issues that we need to deal with. I think this is something we should focus and get done.
And one other, Trustee Quirk.
So, one comment that I'm not hearing anyone speak or address is input of residents. So we have all these committees to allow for input from residents with their different skill levels, different interests or whatever. And it may seem like a lot, staff may want to pare down because of their time, this board may want to pare down because of their time, but really we serve the residents. And the reason we have so many committees is to allow input from the residents on many different levels. And many different commitment levels as well, right? Something that meets once a year is a different level of commitment than something that, a committee that meets once a month. Some committees are more active than others. Some committees demand more from you than others. So we really should take that into consideration when we have this discussion.
Question that I had before, and I asked Attorney Polk, and I don't know if you have an answer about, this came up as it relates to the next item, the Special Events Committee, on whether or not, what the statutes are around residency. Someone serving on a committee in a municipality that's not a resident. And I think I asked for it to be tabled last time, but I want, because we were gonna have this discussion, because we do have committees that residency is not a requirement. And so I don't want to go down that slope where we say you have to be a resident and then we can't fulfill openings because we got to find a resident. And with Act 10 and all of those other things. So I don't know if you've got any information.
Right, thank you for bringing this up. I did speak to Nathan Bayer about this as well, so he's completely filled in. The conclusion that we came to is one that typically we always come to. We always want to make sure that any type of ruling or any type of situation where we have the ability to maintain consistency is the direction that we should go. So you noted that there are committees that do not have that requirement. In our conversations, we think moving in a direction where there is not any type of hurdle that other committees don't have is something that we should avoid. So put differently, there's no statute section that says you have to be a resident of that committee to be, or excuse me, that community to be part of that committee. If that's something that this board wants to start putting on everything going forward, that's one thing. But to put it on this specifically, I think would not be, and this is an opinion, there's precedent for why this is our conclusion, but it would not be something that we recommended for this specific ordinance or whatever type of legislation that this board would like to pass going forward. It has to be consistent.
Okay. Other questions or comments? Trustee Booker.
I'll say something. Okay, so I don't know if this was the item that we need to talk about this now, but I think there's an opportunity. We have all these corporations here in this community that they're not really engaging with the communities. I think they should, and they don't necessarily live in the village. The other piece is virtually none of the staff that work here live in the village. And so, and then there's this other thing where we used to have to live in the city of Milwaukee to get city funding, or the county if you had county funding. All of that was removed. So I'm not sure why we would want to pigeonhole us back into must be a resident to serve, because that limits our ability to attract and recruit people with additional expertise.
And I don't think it's a progressive, we're gonna go out and speak, but if somebody's interested and this board approves them, then I think that's an opportunity. If, they submit an application and the board approves it. Tyler, did you have something?
Well, I don't want to rush the conclusion of this, but I'm trying to think of next steps. And,
Right.
and I want to make sure you can proceed with your other two items. Here's what I think I'm hearing, right? Is anyone opposed for us, any committee that's a one-year term, modifying those ordinances and bringing back to you to consider extending those as a 3-year term? Is there any opposition to having staff do that? Okay, so that's one of the action items. The second action item, I just want to make sure to get like a quick straw poll as far as if we were to spend time drafting a diversity, equity, inclusion committee. Is there any opposition to that, or is there a different direction you would like us to move? Because we can start preparing that ordinance if all of you are interested in that. Okay. So, but just know, I'll start drafting that. That's where we're going to need a collective effort to see if there is an area of either consolidation in that. So, And that's where we'll try to be, because I know politically it's hard. No one wants to make a comment saying we want to remove X committee. Like, I'm getting that no one wants, that's hard to do. Like, I don't want to do that either. I don't think any staff member wants to say, let's get rid of X committee. So that's where maybe we will try our best to strategically find a win-win there that can help. And I think one of my asking points will be for all the staff liaisons to hold a meeting with their committees in the next few months to get feedback from them too. And then we can summarize that feedback to you. And then we could do the same and just do like a general survey from the community and get community input on that.
In a meeting,
Because there's a few different ways that we can certainly
in a meeting.
give you that feedback and prior to making that decision. So is that a good course of action? And eventually I want to bring it back to you, in September, October, so we can at least get these ordinances adopted by the end of the year. So then when we start making the appointments for 2023, like we know what the committee structure would look like. So we still have time, but I want to be proactive in that.
Yes, trustee Thompson, trustee Booker, and then trustee Quirk.
My question goes back to the special events committee. Was there a particular reason or what was the rationale behind the consideration for not having or putting in the residency clause for just that particular committee and not looking at it across the board?
Well, that was one of the three inquiries or proposals from trustee Quirk, so.
So in the special events committee, we have a situation where we have a committee member who doesn't live in Brown Deer or work in Brown Deer or own property in Brown Deer, doesn't vote in Brown Deer, and doesn't pay taxes in Brown Deer. And we have another member who is a reserve member. So who does live in Brown Deer, does own property, lives in Brown Deer, et cetera, et cetera. So we have a Milwaukee resident with no obvious ties to Brown Deer serving on the committee, but we have a Brown Deer resident who is prohibited from participating because that seat's occupied by a Milwaukee resident. And that to me doesn't seem right.
Can I address that? Since I made the recommendations for appointments, the reason the Brown Deer person application did not come in at the time that everyone else's did. It came in later. And so the appointments were already made. So that's why she was an alternate. She was an alternate and so was Debbie Woods. So that's why. So it was not to eliminate a Brown Deer person. Her application came in later. If you go back and look, it did not get approved until later.
I'm also concerned that the committee is not focused on Brown Deer. This last event that was canceled had no Brown Deer businesses involved. No Brown Deer businesses, as far as I'm concerned, or as far as I've been able to discern, were solicited or asked to participate in any way. All the businesses came from outside of Brown Deer. So the focus was not on Brown Deer, and this is, I think, one of the problems that you might have when you have people from other communities participating in Brown Deer stuff. They're looking at their own communities or their friends or family or whoever to see who they can involve in this, where really the focus needs to be Brown Deer. I mean, I spoke to a couple of Brown Deer businesses who were frankly upset. They were pissed off. They found out about it when the board found out about it, which is when the advertising went up on Facebook. So,
Trustee Secrets.
I think the bottom line is that we are okay with not agreeing with the addendum of excluding individuals that don't live in Brown Deer. So we'll just, I think just circling back, like if we're not doing it for all of them, as our attorney had said, then, I think we should move forward.
Any other,
The next,
trustee Johnson and then trustee Quirk.
actually, that was the part of the question. I was just really trying to understand the rationale behind one, but I didn't get the other side of the coin, which was how is it working for other committees? How is it being made? How is it being made to work for other committees when you have non-Brown Deer residents or non-taxpaying entities serving other committees?
so the only committees that I know of that do that are those that require a member to be like an architect or something like that. Because we don't necessarily have that pool to draw from in Brown Deer. So maybe what we need to do is make a generalization that will cover everyone. That would be, you either have to be a Brown Deer resident, you have to own property in Brown Deer, or maybe work in Brown Deer.
I would not be in agreement with that, because that excludes, we don't know who, it could be a grandparent, a family that lives here, it could be the parent, they don't live here, but they may have, children. So going back to what Attorney Polk said, I think it's a slippery slope, and it gets to exclusion and not inclusive. And when we talk about DEI, we need to be careful. Other comments, Trustee Johnson?
Yeah, I was just looking at the makeup of the board, and there's 9 members, and you mentioned that one member made the final decision, then that committee allowed that one member to override the rest of the committee. So I think it's important whoever is chair of that committee understand what is really needed for Brown Deer. And I think that's the most important piece, is that within the commission of each committee, there should be certain guidelines that are established to ensure that Brown Deer is first on anybody's list of what activities and programs we need to better our community.
All right. So I think, did you? So I think, Tyler, you had some guidelines of how to move forward with committees. Do you need any additional information?
At this time, I'll recirculate the discussion in about 2-3 months when we have the updated ordinances, at least with what we discussed. And I'll try to get some more input from the committees and the community for you to digest and consider. But just know, yeah, if we want to do a DEI committee, we'll have to find some kind of arrangement to create room for that. I have some ideas, but once again, that's getting into that political perspective that, and I want to make sure we do our best making everyone happy as much as we can, and that we remain effective in our committee. So there might be some ways that we can do that. We'll talk internally, and I might just identify some options for you to consider at your next meeting.
Trustee Booker?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that as you're doing this, we look at minimum number of people on the committee. I think 3 is too small. I don't know what that magic number is, but I think it needs to be addressed. In terms of.
Yeah. Just to clarify, like 3 for personnel committee, that's one that you feel is too small. Is there other similar opinions to that on the board? Just getting a quick straw poll on that.
Trustee Sechrist, Trustee Owens, and then Trustee Thompson.
Kind of what Trustee Johnson was saying is if I know Trustee Booker is on it and he feels like there needs to be more, then I'm kind of agreeing that if that's what he feels, there should be at least 5. I would, back that one.
I'd be happy to look at that too, then, as an action item.
Trustee Owens.
I was just gonna say the same thing too, because in the last meeting we had, it was just Renee and
Trustee Thompson.
What I'd like to do is refer back to what Tyler had said earlier, that covering around 5 to 7. Because, that way you still have a quorum, I mean, you still have that odd number, but it gives you opportunity for just different levels of expertise. Because while 5 is a good number, but if, a couple more voices doesn't add to it, you can, stay on task.
Thank you.
Okay, Trustee Johnson.
One final question, as it relates to some of the committee have 9 members. Are you looking to lower those numbers, or you stay with those numbers, or even allow the committee to get even larger?
I mean, if I may, once again, this is just my opinion. The only one that has 9 is your, you have plan commission, but there's other things that establish plan commission.
Right.
I wouldn't touch that. And then you have your special events committee, which that's all hands on deck. It's a very involved committee. I think that's very justified to have more than 7 members for that. So for those 2 committees, I can definitely formulate a justification for each.
And just thinking about when committees meet, such as community development, it's 7 members, but they only meet when we have a project that comes before us. And that may be 2 times a year, maybe 3 times a year, but it really is, limited. So, but it's required. All right, so I think if all minds are clear, we're gonna move forward to item number C, consider approval of ordinance 2207, amending special events committee. And I remember we deferred it to this meeting. Is it, and the items that were in the, do we need to take each one of these separate? Or if everyone is in agreement with the, I think it's 3, well, maybe more than 3 things. Looks like 4. Let's see, are we looking at the? Oh, I'm sorry. Trustee Corp.
So I had 3 things for special events. We've already talked about the residency. The other thing is running all advertising through village manager or designee, which would be the Parks and Rec Department. And the third thing was extending the term for the trustee to more than a year.
Tyler.
Yeah, so just to help you with this, I mean, if you as a board want any added discussion on those 3, feel free. When you get to making the recommended motion, if you want to include any of those 3, feel free to read the recommended motion. And then at the end, you can say with included language that addresses, and then you can add in 1, 2, or whichever ones you would want. And based on the discussion, staff will be able to know how to articulate that in the approved ordinance.
And as it relates to the advertising, would this, any advertising for special events in any other committee, once the position for communication and public relations is hired, wouldn't all of our information go through that staff person?
I bet most would, because that's where the skill set is. So once again, that's why the designee makes sense, because in anything special events committee related, it's going to go through the staff liaison, but chances are they'll have that individual do some of the design work too.
Right.
So that's why the designee, I think it's important to have that.
Yeah, so it's consistent too across everything the village puts on. Questions?
So do we need to vote on this?
Yes,
Okay, so.
there's a recommended motion, as Tyra just said. And if you want to amend to include any of the 3 items that trustee Quirk recommended. Trustee Thompson.
So if we're looking at making the recommendation, so in item number 2, to extend the appointed village trustee from 1 year to 2 years, but we had previously talked about it being 3 years. So will we need to include that, or would this be picked up when you made those changes?
That's a good question. So typically trustee appointments are a 1-year term, even if it says 3-year term for all members. Village trustee is treated separately. They're a more of a liaison member than a voting member. So basically all trustee appointments are 1-year terms unless we have something that says otherwise. So if you were to make the amendment for a trustee to be a 2-year term, that would be specific language we would include in the ordinance.
I mean, The trustee on the special events committee is a voting member, though. It's outlined in the.
Yeah, oh, sorry, I should clarify. Some are voting, some are not. Yes, sorry, most are not voting, but my apologies. Yeah, in this case, they are a voting member. And then you just have 8 other regular members. As far as the 9, then we have 2 alternatives beyond the 9,
Yeah. and they
right?
will.
And they don't vote. So, okay, so you can have up to 11 people helping with the cause. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay,
And you can bring in other volunteers to help with stuff too,
so there could be more.
but they're not voting, of course.
And I think, as I indicated earlier, 1-year appointments to trustees because things change and we may have to move people around. And if we have committed that person to 2 years, that limits the ability to bring somebody in to a committee. So, and I don't want, right now, I think most people have 2 or 3 committee appointments, and we don't want to put somebody on 4. Trustee Court?
Special events, I think, is a little bit of special consideration because of the 4th of July, which is the biggest event that it puts on. So would it make sense to have the trustee terms start at a different point, like start in August and go through? If it's a 1-year term, because the way it is now, it's silly because you come in and, I mean, I already explained this, you come in shortly before the 4th of July and then you're jerked off before the next 4th of July.
But that's with anyone that's elected in April, you're gonna come into some committee that's already functioning and some, it may be in the midst of, I get it, there's an event, but there could be other events too. I guess I would say I respectfully disagree. Other comments? And remember, this committee was 4th of July. We know 4th of July is the 4th of July, but it was changed to special events to accommodate a lot of other things. And so whenever a person is coming on, it could be a person that's coming on that's already involved. We don't know.
I'm just trying to think of the functionality of this committee and the pressure it puts on the trustee who will not really participate in the only 4th of July that they're involved in on the committee. Because they, you know, they come in June and 1 meeting and that's the 4th of July. And then you work for the next 4th of July, but you're not on the committee for the actual 4th of July.
But there are other special events they're supposed to be doing. It's not just the 4th of July.
But the 4th of July is the biggest thing that we do. It involves the most people. It involves the most, you know, most detail. I mean, if we bring back the parade and the food tent or you know, the beer tent, it's the most involved of all this committee does.
Other comments, questions? Trustee Johnson?
Because the appointment is usually made by, excuse me, by the chair, so could that appointment happen after the 4th of July each year?
That's what I just suggested.
That's what I'm saying. Is
Well,
that,
why? They could be attending meetings.
I was just wondering, because the appointment usually happens in May,
Our first meeting in May.
so they actually will go through 4th of July already. As a new committee member, if they haven't served previously, this will be their first 4th of July going through. So,
And that's true for all of us.
And then they'll be removed before they actually have worked for the 4th of July. For the next 4th of July. They'll be
That's not
removed.
necessarily true. They could be reappointed. It's just not, they can say you gotta be on for 2 years.
Well,
They could be
The way
reappointed.
the ordinance is worded right now, it says you can only serve 1 year.
Well, and that ordinance was presented, wasn't it presented by you initially, the special events?
That just picked up language from what it has always been. I
So it's
didn't- I
always
didn't
been,
know that.
it's always been a 1-year appointment.
Correct.
Okay, so it's worked. It was always been a 1-year appointment.
But it hasn't been in practice. Whoever was on the committee just gets reappointed.
Other questions? Trustee Booker?
This comment, I think for consistency's sake, if we have the trustee serve for 1-year appointment, I don't know why we would change it for one committee. Because, I mean, as it was stated, when you can come on in May And you still got how many other members that still been on the committee working? And I don't know that that one person is gonna make that much of a value difference, because they've only been on the committee for 2 months.
But we're talking about a trustee though, serving on the committee, serving the committee. And all other members will serve more than 1 year,
But
because
I,
we're doing 5 to 7 years, right?
but the thing I don't understand, well, I'm not quite getting.
Not bad, it's that.
3 to 5 years, or we're
It's
increasing
3.
terms.
Just, that was already at 3 years, I believe.
I mean, I think that historically, you had people that would be on committees for 20 years, which I don't think that's proven. Okay, and so, because I think there needs to be change, different ideas, people should not stay on these committees for life. But in terms of a trustee, you know, people leave, people move out. People pass away, I mean, things are gonna happen. So I don't know that we need to, for one committee, we would change what, I guess, is that an ordinance that, say the trustee can only serve 1 year?
Yes, well, like for this committee, there, in the composition section, it says one of the members shall be a village trustee who shall serve a 1-year term. So typically that's stated like that in the ordinance for each committee.
But it does not prohibit from one person being reappointed.
Normally it doesn't. I'm just looking in this section. I don't see anything that would state they can't be reappointed. It just says who shall serve a 1-year term.
Right.
So that's up to the president and the board's confirmation on whether or not you confirm that trustee appointment to another term or not.
Correct. Trustee Owens.
Comment, even if they're not a trustee, it doesn't preclude them from helping out on the committee. Still.
Yes.
So where are we?
We need to make, there's an opportunity to make a motion to adopt. And if you want any of these amendments to include that, if not, don't, and we vote on it. So is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to adopt ordinance 22 -7, amending the special events committee in the village code.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
It's been moved by trustee Sechrist and second by trustee Thompson. All those in favor?
Discussion,
Trustee Quirk,
I would like to amend the motion to include that all advertising by the committee be run through the village manager or his designee.
trustee Sechrist, do you accept that friendly amendment?
So that would be Danny, and she's already on it, so I would assume, is that correct, that she would be involved in that decision?
Yeah, she's an ex officio member, but yeah, she's part of the committee. So what would happen is as long as she's on the committee and you as a committee, as a, are saying, we're wanting to do this advertising, I would say, Danny, you have the right to say yay or nay, as long as staff is aware of what's
I know
kind of
that's what they-
advertising is occurring.
I know that's what they did in the past, is they had a member do a graphic and then she approved it. And then that's how they utilized some of the graphics that have been utilized in the last couple of events.
It's because Danny is the ex officio staff liaison.
Yeah,
and
so I
she
don't
would
know if
be my designee in this case.
So I don't know if it needs to be in there, because I think that's the assumption. I mean, that's how I assumed that she was a part of it. Like that's her voice.
So do you accept the friendly amendment or no?
I mean, I don't think it's needed. I mean, I think that's what's already being completed.
So it's been moved by trustee Sechrist and seconded by trustee Thompson to adopt ordinance 2207, amending the special events committee in the village code. All those in favor? Any opposed?
Nay.
It's been, the motion carries with one nay, and that's from trustee Quirk. The next item on our agenda is consider approval of the compliance maintenance annual report, CMAR, and adoption of the resolution authorizing submittal to the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources. So that's why you're here, Matt.
Talk about some sanitary sewers. So this is our annual report, different from the stormwater one that we heard last month. And so the village is under a permit with the DNR to operate our sanitary sewer collection system, which ultimately drains to the MMSD system, in our case, the Jones Island plant. So we have 55 miles of sanitary sewer in the village and about 1,000 manholes, and Dana Faulkner, our sanitary sewer technician, is in charge of that entire, all those assets. So he's out cleaning our sewers and televising them and then determining if there's any deficiencies or problems. And then that's where it comes across my desk, and then we put out a project to try to rectify those issues. There are two problem areas that we have had in the village historically, where we get what's called sanitary sewer overflows, or SSOs. And that is in the Green Knoll subdivision, which is this neighborhood bounded by 60th Street to the west, Dean Road to the south, 51st Street to the east, and then Brownie Road to the north. Our problem intersection is at 59th Range and Betty. And then our other problem area where there are SSOs is in the Bradley Estates subdivision, so just west of the school. And the intersection is typically at 61st and Darnell. And so we've done a lot of work in that neighborhood, Emily's neighborhood. So you've seen, I think that was 2 years ago and finishing up last year, where the blue trucks were in the neighborhood. We were lining all of the sanitary sewer mains in that neighborhood. And the goal there is what we're trying to do is a system of our age. You get cracks in the pipes, and then you're getting excess clear water when it rains that's coming into the sanitary sewer system that's not designed to handle any of that excess water. So sanitary sewer is just anything that you're flushing down the toilet in the house. That's the only water that should be in that pipe. And so when we start adding all this extra water that's not supposed to be there, it has to go somewhere, and it'll find its lowest point, and that's typically people's basements. So we are trying to eliminate that clear water from entering our system by upgrading these pipelines. So in the Green Knoll subdivision, we have lined all of the village mains. So that's the pipes in the road. And then in 2018, we completed a project where we took about $480,000 from MMSD. So that's through the private property inflow and infiltration program. So we all pay into that program, all taxpayers to MMSD, and then MMSD takes that money that they collect and they earmark it back to the communities to use based on equalized value. And so Brown Deer gets a certain pot of money through this program, and then we are able to use it specifically for lining lateral pipes that's from the house out to the main. And so we are focusing that money on these two problem locations. The Green Knoll subdivision is slightly worse than the 61st Range of Betty one. And so when it rains heavy at night, you'll sometimes see Dana, maybe his truck will be out there, he's checking our sewer levels. And if they rise to a certain point, we have to pump that sewer water out. And that goes into the ditch, which is an environmental hazard, adds for obvious reasons. And we have to do a bunch of reporting to the DNR, and they don't like that. So we need to eliminate this water, and that's what we're doing. So Green Knoll subdivision has been so far since 2018 that we've done that, we've had 0 SSOs. So, and we've lined only about, well, just shy of half the homes in that subdivision. So our next focus then was to start doing some work in the Bradley Estates subdivision. So we first lined all the sewer mains. That's why Emily saw the blue trucks there. That was just lining the village stuff in the street. The next step, though, is to line or do some sort of rehabilitation to the pipelines from the house down to the road. So we have done a study ahead of this, probably back in 2015, where we dive flooded all the ditches and we determined flow rates from homes and are trying to target the worst leakers in that neighborhood. And that way we can get the biggest amount of water out of our system first. We used a lot of the PPI money on that first project in the Green Knoll subdivision. So right now our balance, we have about $190,000 built up. I'd like to build that up a little bit more so we can do, about 100 homes in the neighborhood to see any sort of impact. And then you get a lot of economy of scale when you do that. So we'll probably end up letting it build for a little while before we actually do a large project in that area. We are gonna look at, though, outside of the program, digging and replacing some lateral pipes, probably in 2023, in conjunction with the water main relay project. So we'll be digging up their water main and all the water services. So we'll replace our water or our sanitary sewer pipes at that same time. And that'll be down on 61st in Goodrich area. So that's kind of where we're focusing our efforts. That's what we have going on in our sanitary sewer collection system. The rest right now is just kind of mainly under routine maintenance. Dana's just out cleaning, televising, and looking at manholes, and we do some rehab as needed. But last year, happy to report, we had 0 SSOs. And so far this year in 2022, we've had a couple pretty heavy rain events, and Dana has been out checking our sewer levels, and everything has been great. We've had 0 close calls. We were a little worried on this last week. I think it was after after the fives night, so after Wednesday night, it rained pretty hard up in this area. Looked at that Green Knoll subdivision, and it was flowing great. So we think the work that we're doing just observationally is working. We do have a lot of flow meters in there that we've been collecting over the last couple of years, and we're going to take a look at that data compared with previous data prior to mine. So far so good.
Matthew, is there, how does Dana get notified? Is there some system that he would get? Because I'm assuming he doesn't live that close, so he'd have to.
Well, Dana does live, he does live right by Triple I, or used to be Triple I,
Okay.
Calumet and Titonia. So he is close and is able to respond within minutes. We'll monitor, typically what we'll do is we'll monitor weather events ahead of time.
Yeah.
They usually don't sneak up on you. And so we have pumps and stuff loaded. And then there are some points in the manholes that he'll get notified on if water reaches a certain level, and then he knows to kind of come on and check. So we just try to stay ahead of it. Now, there are some where, it rains a heck of a lot harder than you think.
The weatherman tells you.
Right, and, you can get caught where you're a little bit behind the 8 ball, and then that's where, I think this happened maybe 4 years ago or 3 years ago, where there were some homes down in Emily's neighborhood that their basements did unfortunately back up because we just weren't out there quick enough. So that can happen.
And is there any cost to the residents for any of this?
When we're lighting or doing the
Yeah.
lateral rehab, no. So everything is 100% funded through the MMSD PPI program or through the sanitary sewer utility fund.
But if the basement floods, it's on them.
Yep, then that's on them. That would be their owner's insurance to have to pick up the tab, the cleanup tab.
Questions? If no questions, we need approval of the compliance maintenance annual report and adoption of the resolution. Now, because we're adopting this resolution, do we need to do a roll call vote?
Resolution and ordinances you do.
Right. So this is consideration of approval, so because it's a resolution, is there a motion?
I move approval of the compliance maintenance and report CMAR and the resolution authorizing submittal to the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources.
It's been moved by trustee Quirk and seconded by trustee Owens to approve the compliance report and a resolution authorizing submittal to the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources. And we will do a roll call vote. Trustee Johnson.
Aye.
Trustee Quirk.
Aye.
Trustee Thompson. Trustee Owens.
Aye.
Trustee Sechrist.
Aye.
Trustee Booker.
Aye.
President Montgomery. Motion carries. And that concludes our agenda items for tonight. I move adjournment at 7:55. Good time. Yeah.
Yes.
I got a question for you.